Pax vobiscum. Welcome back to the channel, and to another episode of Vesta Vox. Today's episode will be discussing the book Wildfire by Zane Grey, which we finished earlier this month. And as always, before we dive into a discussion of the book itself and my sort of thoughts upon reading it, let's look at the book itself and its author. And so now we shall take a look at the book itself. As you can see here is the first edition book that I was reading from, with the original dust jacket. And as you can tell from the dust jacket and the book itself, it has been well loved. So looking inside, we do have the original description there, similar to today. And holding the book, it has a very nice physical feel. It's not too heavy, not too light. And as we turn and look at it again, you can see this very nice, lovely red color of the book itself, Zane Grey. And actually in relatively good condition for a first edition that was, as we'll see as I flip the pages, published in 1917. First page there with the type of wildfire just off center, and I thought this was interesting here, where it discusses how the book was produced in wartime and is compliant with paper and ink requirements of the time, so a little bit of a time capsule as well, if you will. But scrolling through the book itself, the pages, again, very good condition. I was glad to have found it in this way. But I always do enjoy physical books, and this book was a joy to read and hold, and it has that lovely old book smell too. I also did enjoy that you could tell it was well loved due to the dust jacket, and every once in a while there would be a word or so forth in there that was maybe missing a bit of the letter or something to sort of show its age. Oh, and there's the Rainbow Trail, which had been made into a movie several times over, which I thought was fascinating, But yes, so that is the physical book itself that we were reading from. As you will see as we go through his life story, sort of, Zane Grey was a rather interesting character. Born on January 31st, 1872 in Zanesville, Ohio, his original name was Pearl Zane Grey, which by today's standards is quite an unusual name for a young boy. Later on, he chose to drop his first name and simply go by Zane Grey, the author that we know today. Grey's father was a dentist and, unfortunately, a man who believed that violent beatings were the proper way to discipline Zane and his siblings. Thankfully, though, Zane's mother was more kind and compassionate, and he ended up finding a more preferred father figure in an elderly man who nurtured his love of nature and history. This love for the outdoors, and particularly hiking and fishing, as well as historical storytelling, stayed with him throughout his life, always lingering in the back of his mind. For a time, Zane did consider becoming a writer, but during college he decided that following in his father's footsteps as a dentist was the more pragmatic choice. Despite his practical studies, he continued to enjoy writing, poetry, and outdoor activities. He also played baseball in college and even attracted the attention of several scouts. After graduating, Zane moved to New York City to start a dentistry practice. However, he had an ulterior motive for this, for New York City was also home to many publishers, and while practicing dentistry by day, he spent his nights writing. Although early on Grey showed some talent, he initially struggled to assemble cohesive stories. During this time, he continued playing baseball and frequently went camping with his brother. Eventually, he met one Lina Roth, affectionately known by all as Dolly, and the two were married. However, their relationship was considered unconventional. Grey reportedly had bouts of rage and depression, and along with this, a tendency to indulge in extramarital affairs. However, Dolly remained by his side, providing emotional and financial support thanks to her inheritance, proofreading his work and managing his business affairs. Together they had 3 children. Despite his extensive traveling and numerous mistresses, Dolly supported his career and stayed with him. In 1918, Grey and his family moved to Aldina, California, where his writing career truly flourished. He gave up baseball and devoted all his extra time to his craft. Grey's elation and depression often hinged on the reactions of publishers who read his work, some of whom rejected it outright, while others eagerly sought it out. During this period, he also traveled extensively, venturing both abroad and throughout the American West. Grey's most famous novel, Riders of the Purple Sage, was written during this prolific time and became a Hollywood movie 5 times over in the subsequent decades. Eventually, he abandoned his dentistry practice altogether, choosing instead to focus on traveling and writing full-time. During the Great Depression, royalties from his books actually helped sustain his family through the uncertain times. Gray's wanderlust took him far and wide, including the South Pacific Islands, Tahiti, Australia, and other remote places as such he called untouched lands. On October 23, 1939, Zane Grey eventually passed away from heart failure at the age of 67 in his California home. Over his lifetime, Zane Grey wrote more than 40 books and became one of the first millionaire writers, a remarkable feat especially in that day and age. His life was filled with wanderlust in more ways than one, exploration, and an ability to vividly describe the world around him. His deep love for the American West and the romanticized visions he had of it was complemented by his meticulous research into its history. One particularly fascinating example of Gray's research comes from his novel The Vanishing American, published in 1925. And now I shall read a quote from the Wikipedia page describing Zane Grey to really sort of run home how he felt about research and how he felt about those he researched. To quote, "Initially serialized in the Ladies' Home Journal in 1922, the book sparked heated debate. Its Navajo hero was reportedly inspired by the great Native American athlete Jim Thorpe. In this novel, Grey depicted the Navajo people's struggle to preserve their identity and culture against the corrupting influences of white government officials and missionaries. This perspective angered religious groups at the time, but Grey defended his stance, saying, 'I have studied the Navajo Indians for 12 years. I know their wrongs. The missionaries sent out there are almost everyone mean, vicious, weak, immoral, useless men.' Ultimately, however, Grey had to agree to structural changes in the book to have it published. I hope this overview of Zane Grey gives you some insight into the author of Wildfire. It sheds light on his love for describing the desert landscapes we traverse with Lucy and Sloane. And speaking of our main characters, I'd like to move on to discuss some of the themes of the book that stood out to me, and my interpretation of them. Wildfire by Zane Grey was a very interesting read. I enjoyed the book. It certainly was a sort of romantic Western adventure, but for me, even though there was that romance between Lucy Boston and Lynn Sloane, for me the true romance was between Lucy and Wildfire. Let me explain. Lucy at the beginning of the book is hoping for some sort of adventure, and she certainly gets it. And she finds it in a romance with Lynn Sloane, a cowboy she finds half dead out in the wilderness. She gets it also by finding a wild horse, Wildfire. We see before these events that Lucy is a bit strong-willed and she does as she pleases. But something about Wildfire, something about riding Wildfire. She has a true connection with the animal, and in doing so it only seems to embolden her. This wonderful horse has unlocked the ability of her to pursue her dreams, to allow her to do things that she would not necessarily have done before. Now is the means for her to pursue her dream of beating the Sage King, of beating her father. She's happy, she's confident, and then it all gets taken away. Again, I would argue, and at least based on my own personal opinion, that this is the tragic love story of a girl and her horse. A couple of examples of this. When Lucy meets Lynn Sloane out in the cottonwood trees. Oh, they talk to each other and they hold each other, and she does truly seem to fall in love with Lynn Sloane. But she always asks about Wildfire. And then, when she's fighting for her life, and Joel Creech is trying to kill her and do worse, she hears the shrill blast of a stallion running towards her, and when she looks up she doesn't call Lynn Sloane's name, she calls Wildfire's. And then as the two horses run for their lives and Wildfire collapses alongside Sage King, even though Lucy grew up with Sage King, even though Sage King is part of her father's fleet of horses, even though Sage King is her father's favorite, Lucy runs to Wildfire's side and holds him as he tragically passes away. At the end of the book, we see Lucy changed. Lynn Sloane keeps trying to convince her to ride out to the monuments where they first met, where their love story really began. Lucy denies this, though. She says that maybe once they come back from Durango, where it is inferred that they are to be married, maybe then she'll ride out to the monuments with him. In the last chapter, we are sort of from Lynn Sloane's perspective, and we see how changed Lucy is. She doesn't cherish going out and riding out to the monuments. Her adventurous spirit is curtailed a bit. She has no interest in racing anymore, claiming it is due to injuries from what Joel Creech did to her. But in reality, I think it is from an injury to a heart. Part of that injury, I think, perchance, injury to the heart, is not just the loss of her beloved Wildfire, but of having to sort of mitigate the truth in front of her father. She tells Lynn Sloane that afterwards, when they try to think of what they're going to tell her father about the sort of race between Sage King and Wildfire, that the elder Creech, Joel Creech's father, had told Lucy what she must say. And so we are back with Lucy and Lynn Sloane. Lucy is given to her father and is safely taken inside the house where she is treated, and Lynn Sloane and Bostel, Lucy's father, talk. I do not like Bostel, but we'll get into that in a moment. But even the entire time as Bostel is sitting there and is pleased to see that all of his racers came running back to him, is ecstatic that Lucy has been returned to him. He holds the Sage King and is pleased that Sage King is back as well, but in the conversation between him and Lynn Sloane, there's this sort of undertone. He puts off asking about it, but he finally does and asks about the red hoss, Wildfire. Lynn Sloane, who loved Wildfire in his own way, finds it painful to speak about it, but yet he forces out the words that Lucy told him that Bostel needed to hear. He tells him that the Sage King killed Wildfire on his feet, and that is all there is to say about it. Now, whether Bostel understood the inference, or he just took it at face value, I don't know, but I would think that he would just sort of accept that the Sage King outran Wildfire, and that is what killed Wildfire, and that Sage King is undefeated. What I do not like about Bostel, and I do not like about that section personally, is the inference that if Lucy and Sloane had come back and said that Wildfire had ran down the Sage King, that Wildfire had ran him down while carrying a much heavier burden, that being tax, supplies, and a fully grown man, fully clothed, versus Sage King, who only had Lucy upon his back, Wildfire ran him down. Wildfire won that race. And yet, even in memory, they cannot think of it. All they did was tell Bostel that Sage King killed Wildfire on his feet. It is this lie, or white lie, or sort of beating about the bush that I think contributed to the sort of resolved or reserved, that's the word I'm looking for, this more reserved Lucy Bostel that we see at the end of the book. She knows the truth. She knows that her horse, her beloved Wildfire, beat the Sage King, could beat the Sage King. But she also knew her father. She knew what her father was like. She saw for her entire life how her father treated those who crossed him when it came to horses. Oh, a generous man, a lovely man, a man loved by everyone in Bostel's Ford. To a point. You can see throughout the book where people fear him. They fear crossing him. And you see descriptions of Bostel, of when he sees a horse that he fancies or covets, how he treats the other person. Gone is the generous, kind Bostel just for the sake of generosity. He throws money and horses and all sorts of gifts and favors, as we see as he did with Lynn Sloane. It's all a lie. He wants the horse. He wants the horse for himself because his insecurity cannot allow anyone else to have the fastest horses in the valley. He alone must hold that handle. No one can beat Bostel, because if they did, his greatness would be at question. I don't like Bostel, and I don't like the fact that Lucy had to essentially lie to keep the peace. Because she knew that if they didn't say what if they didn't say what the elder Creech told her to say, then life would be impossible. She told Lynn Sloane as much before, when she warned him that her father would hate him, would come to hate him, would make his life miserable just because he wanted his horse. Again, I do not like Bostel. I do not like how Lucy's lie affected her at the end. Wildfire was a wild spark in her heart, and that spark died along with him, and I believe died even more when she had to, out of love, had to lie, just to keep the peace. She got Lynn Sloane, she has her love, but she lost something else along the way. And now to speak a little bit about Bostel. As I mentioned several times before, I do not like him. He is described several times in the book as being very generous and loved, and he did these wonderful things such as starting Bostel's Ford and owning a boat that would cross the river to help people out, and he would, provide money and gifts, etc. But his love feels conditional. His kindness, his generosity is conditional. Oh, sure, he's helped people, but he also killed a man in a dispute once. People are afraid of him. People sort of put up with him because they know of his quote, generous side, but also know about how he is, quote, part horse and how he feels about horses. But that doesn't feel right to me. A generous man, a truly humble, generous, kind man, would not do what they did to the Creeches. Because Creech, the elder Creech, had 2 racers that Bostel felt threatened by, and because Creech would not sell them to him, no matter what just exorbitant amounts of money and horses Bostel offered instead, because he had pride, Bostel grew angry. Bostel ostracized the Creeches across the river, and then, in deep darkness, he decided that he was going to kill them. Not by his own hand necessarily. Indirectly by cutting the lashings of the boat across the river. He knew the Colorado was going to flood. He knew that, perchance, there could be a possibility that Blue Roan would outrun Sage King in the races. And instead of being humble, instead of thinking to himself, well, I have held the title for so long, maybe if he had taken some joy in the fact of, then it will be a real race, then we'll see who shall win, and then that means that I simply must do better. That I must breed better horses, or train harder, etc. Instead, he decided he was going to kill. He even talked back and forth with himself about how could he, Bostel, someone who claimed to love horses, consign those across the river, those beautiful, wonderful horses who Creech loved as Bostel loved Sage King. How could he kill them, resign them to starvation, to dehydration? But he did it. He cut the ropes, and then had the gall to act as if he had no idea what was going on. He even remotely placed a little bit of the blame on Sloane, to deflect it from him. Towards the end, when Lucy is stolen by the Creeches, who would have thought that would have happened after what he'd done to them? He says that his sin has found him out. He seems repentant. And he shocks everybody by actually sending his racers after Lucy, which I think says something again about Bostel, the fact that no one believed that he actually would do it. I personally don't find him redeemed at the end, especially because Lucy had to tailor her words and told Lynn Sloane what to say so that way they could continue to live in Bostel's Ford in relative peace. I don't find him exonerated or redeemed. I don't like him. He was mean. He was cruel. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he did it anyway. And he didn't change at all. Oh, he got Lucy back, and he was thankful, but I don't see him changing. Someone else might come along. Someone else might have a faster horse. And what is he going to do then? Will he cut the ropes again? Will he poison the horse, starve them? What will he do? I don't believe he can be trusted when it comes to matters of a horse. The book sort of seems to romanticize that as, he's half horse, and this is simply the way horse riders or horse lovers are, but Creech wasn't that way. Elder Creech wasn't cruel or mean. He was excited for the racers, And if anything, Bostel was the one who inflamed him because of how he treated him, pushed him across the river, was ungenerous, was cruel and mean to him. They used to be as brothers. Lucy talked about how she used to ride on Elder Creech's knee. But no more, all because Bostel could not let go of his pride, of his insecurity, and extend a hand to his friend. Because of his envy, and his covetousness, and his hatred, and his jealousy, he alone is the villain in this story, I believe. If he were just a little bit more kind and truly humble, the events may not have happened the way they did. For good or bad. I still believe Lucy would have more than likely met Wildfire, perchance. I would hope so. The ending of this story is bittersweet to me, because in the end Lucy Bostel got the adventure she wished for. She found that beautiful wild Arabian stallion that she dreamed of. She was able to race him against her father's favorite. She was able to see her Wildfire beat her father's favorite. She was able to find a husband, someone who she truly loved. But in the end, she was left without something important to her. That first love, that horse. The horse that ran until his heart burst to try to save her and to escape his own destruction. The horse that who she rescued randomly that one sunny day had grown to love her, would be led docilely by her. He was wild and savage, but at Lucy's touch they were a team. That is why I believe the ending is bittersweet, because Lucy gained some, but lost much. Wildfire is a very interesting book. I do find that the descriptive language used was quite fun. I was able to really immerse myself into the story. I find that the author's, Zane Grey's, description of the desert very much matches what I've seen of the desert myself, having traveled extensively through the southwest United States, particularly the Grand Canyon. How he describes that area is very accurate. If you've ever had a chance to go there, I highly recommend. If you ever have the opportunity to, oh, what a magnificent sight it is. You truly can't comprehend the distance, the depth of the Grand Canyon. And the desert itself, many people think, oh, it's just ugly and dark, but there's beauty in every bit of creation. And I do enjoy the descriptive language that Zane Grey uses to really immerse us into the book and the story. And so concludes the Vesta Vox episode for Wildfire by Zane Grey. Overall, again, I enjoyed the book very much, except for the specific character Bostel. But otherwise, it was a good dive into the sort of romanticized version of the American West, and I enjoyed that most of the conflicts seem to come from inter-character sort of conflicts, and horse thieves and Lucy being willful and etc., things that we have discussed so far. But highly recommend that you read the book for yourselves. I also recently released the full book narration on my channel, which you can find with this same profile image, or thumbnail if you will, on my video list. So if you're interested in hearing the book from beginning to end, do note it is over 11 hours long, reading from start to finish. But if you prefer more broken up sections and chapters, do check out my videos as well as my playlist for Wildfire by Zane Grey. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I can't wait to dive into the next book with you. If you have any feedback about how you would like these sort of readings to be, do you like having discussions at the end of each chapter versus a Vesta Vox episode kind of culminating at the end? Do you like having the specific chapters read out and then the full audiobook, or do you prefer just full audiobooks, that sort of thing? Do please let me know. Any feedback that I can get, I will take, because I don't know how to improve unless someone has a suggestion. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for joining me, and keep reading, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Goodbye.